Where are the other CDs?
الحمد لله نستعينه واستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Dear respected brothers, sisters, friends, I'd like to invite you to our next event, delivered by Brother Abdur Raheem Green. Is there a God? Brother Abdur Raheem Green is very famous in his dawah work. He delivers lectures and he's very famous for his series in dawah in the park. He's also delivered lectures at many other universities, including ours. Inshallah, the program today will last for around 50 minutes, after which there will be 50 minutes, inshallah. After which there will be a question and answer session for 15 minutes. I'd like to begin by the recitation of the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. The translation: He is Allah, other than whom there is no deity, knower of the unseen and the witnessed. He is the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. He is Allah, other than whom there is no deity, the sovereign, the pure, the bestower of faith, the overseer, the exalted in might, the compeller, the superior. Exalted is Allah above whatever they associate with Him. He is Allah, the creator, the inventor, the fashioner, to Him belong the best names. Whatever is in the heaven and the earth is exalting Him, and He is exalted in might and wise. Inshallah, without further ado, I'd request Brother Abdur Raheem to deliver his lecture.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We'd like to begin by praising Allah and praise Him, and we seek His help and we ask for His forgiveness, and we seek refuge with Allah from the evil of ourselves and from the evil consequence of our evil actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, there is none to misguide, and whomsoever Allah leaves to go astray, there is none to guide. And I testify that Allah alone is worthy of worship, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and His messenger. Okay, my brothers and sisters, today may not be exactly what you're going to expect. I suspect some people may be thinking I'm going to be trying to prove and give some rational proofs of the existence of a creator. And I won't ignore that altogether, but that's actually not what is not the main focus of what I'm going to be talking about today. But I promise you that I'm going to talk on the topic. Actually, it's my principle. I talk on the topic. I always talk on the topic. Is there a God? You see, what really I find very interesting, and this is what I want us to explore, and by the way, just to mention, could everyone turn their mobiles off, please? Or put it on silent, or whatever. Because I forgot mine, so someone else may have forgotten. So the thing I'd like to ask everyone, I'm sure everyone wants to sit down, you know, so the thing I'd like to really ask everyone, I need to get your input here. So the first thing I really want to talk about is, we're asking the question, is there a God? So in order to answer the question, is there a God? First of all, I want to know, what is a God? If we want to know whether there's a God or not, what is a God? To ask whether there is such a thing as a God or not. And now I'm asking you the question, what is a God? What is a God? Go on then. No, forget that thing. What is it? You can all hear me, right? Yeah. No, you can. Speakers corner, you come down there. You need a voice for that. Okay. What is a God? Brothers and sisters, come on, please. I mean, you must be used to this, right? You're university students. So, what is a God? Someone give me a definition of a God.
Supreme being.
Supreme being. That's the God. That's the God. Yeah? So, for example, some people worship some statues or some idols. Do they believe that that's the supreme being? The Hindus, how many gods do the Hindus have? Several million. Do they believe every one of these several million gods are supreme beings? Yes or no?
Probably.
No, they don't. Of course they don't. So maybe you don't know, but they don't believe that, right? And if they don't, which they don't, then that's not a definition. What is a God? Come on.
One worthy of worship.
Okay, one worthy of worship. Okay, something that is worthy of worship. Okay, that's good. Something that is worthy of worship. Okay. Can anyone give me another definition? That is a definition, certainly. But I want to take it a little bit further than that. Why do people worship things? What makes people worship things? Let's get beyond. Okay, then what's worship? If it's worthy of worship, what is worship? Let's go right there. What's worship then? It's worthy of worship. What is worship? Yeah?
So worship's not one thing. Worship is not just knowledge that it exists. And therefore, from there it can be.
So I know the glass exists, right? And by knowing that, I'll worship it.
But if you don't know that it exists, how can you worship it?
Oh, but I mean, you know, that's like saying, you know, that's not. No, I mean, you know, that's really doesn't help anything. Okay, so let's go back. What is a God? What is a God? Okay, let's think of it. Try and think of it like this. Try and think of it this way. Why do people worship things? Why do people worship things? We all agree that a God is something that people worship. Does anyone have a problem with that definition? Yeah? A God is something that people worship. Yes? Yeah? Yes?
Yes.
No, because some of you are looking very blank. So I'm just making sure that everyone's actually here on planet Earth. Right? Okay? So we all agree that a God is something that people worship. Why do people worship things?
Because we are weak.
Huh?
Because we are weak. And that
Because we are weak. Yeah, go on.
we're in need.
Yes, we're in need. That's it. We're in need. We are weak.
Something greater than us.
And we're in need. Something greater than us. Yeah.
Happens in life.
I mean, for example, I may think that Muhammad Ali is a greater boxer than me, but I don't worship him. Yeah? So there's something specific. Why do, I mean, you're getting there, but why do people worship things? We're weak. Go on.
They can
Okay. Okay. You heard my thing. Okay. Okay, why do people worship things? Because we believe, or the person who's worshipping that God, they believe that by worshipping it, they're going to get what they need and get what they want. Yes? So if we just give a simple example. You know, someone worships a statue or some idol or some god, right? And they pray to it and they sacrifice to it. And they believe that by praying to it and sacrificing to it and worshipping it, they are going to get what they want and what they need. Yes? That's why they worship it. They believe that in some way, this thing has the ability to give them what they want and what they need. Yeah? Many religions, pagan religions, have different gods for different things. Yeah? So if you want to win you're having a battle, or you're fighting a war, and you want to win the war, you worship the god of. And if you want the rain to fall, you worship the god of. Good. This is excellent. Getting someone. And if you want to have a child, you worship the fertility god. Okay. And if you want the crops to grow, you worship the crop god or whatever. So this is quite often you have different gods for different things. And people believe that by worshipping these gods, by worshipping these things, they will get what they need and what they want. That's the God, and that's the worship of the God. So a God can be defined as something, or let's put it this way. Let's branch out just from that narrow concept of what is a God. The narrow concept being, we just imagine that a God is some idol or some statue. Let's make it a bit more comprehensive and think about this. Your God, I'm talking actually to all of us here, you individually, your God, whether you call yourself a Muslim or not, your God is the thing that you think is going to give you what you want and what you need. Your God is the thing that you think is going to give you what you want and what you need. That is your God. For some people, the God takes on the form of a manifestation of some physical thing, an idol, a statue. Maybe that idol or statue represents a spirit or a power. But for other people, their God is something more abstract. For some people, their God is something not quite so clear. For example, wealth. I'm sure if we think about it, in fact, we could quite understand that for many people, wealth is just as much a god as Krishna or Ganesh or Zeus or Aphrodite or, I don't know, whoever, whatever other gods that people worship. Because how many people imagine that by having wealth, I will get what I want and what I need? How many people believe that money is the means to achieve what I want and what I need? Lots of people. Yeah? If you believe that money is going to give you what you want and what you need, if you believe that money somehow has that power to give you what you want and what you need, then indeed your God is money. If you believe beauty is going to give you what you want and what you need, or fame, or fashion, or music, or. In fact, if we think about it, the answer to this question is quite simple. Is there a God? There are millions of gods. In fact, there are as many, you can't even count how many gods there are. Because whatever people believe is going to give them what they need and what they want, that's their God. Everybody has a God. Everybody puts their faith, their hope, their trust in someone or something. You can't help it. In fact, it's part of human nature. It's part of the human condition. Part of what it means to be human is exactly that thing. You put your faith in things. You put your hope in them. You put your trust in them. You rely upon them. And you worship them. the worship doesn't necessarily have to be some sacrifices and some rituals in front of an idol. Worship can take on many different forms. Worship is the actions and the things that you do in order to get your God to give you what you want. Right? That's what you do. In order to get your God to give you what you want and what you need, worship is what you do to acquire that. So for idols it may be some sacrifices, some food, some prayers, some devotions, some, I don't know. But how about for other things? Well, equally. You see, I came from a part of society, okay, the what you could call maybe the upper middle class, British, white, English society. Don't sound it like it anymore, because it's from mixing around too many Arabs and Pakistanis and East Londoners and stuff like that. So things talk like this, mate. But believe me, if you met me 20 years ago, I sounded like Prince Charles. But my accent has... I can slip back into it when I need to, you know. When I have to, see, I can sort of roll back into the old way of talking, old chap, you know. So, but I used to talk like that the whole time, through my nose or through something else maybe. But anyway, that's the sort of society I was brought up in. And there is this great, and let's be frank about it, okay? This great quasi-religious ritual, perhaps not so popular anymore, but a great quasi-religious ritual of the white upper middle class is called the dinner party. And I was brought up with lots of dinner parties. And everything was about being you and being non-you. My mother was always going on about, oh, you shouldn't do that, it's very non-you. You shouldn't say that, it's very non-you. I mean, there was a whole set vocabulary. There were certain words that we were never supposed to use. We were never, for example, supposed to say toilet. You'd never say, excuse me, where's the toilet? Oh my God. It was one of those. Those nouveau riche, new rich, as opposed to old, traditional, established toilet. You see, in its attempt to make a good, solid thing, English word, loo, lavatory, bog, where do I... you can say, in fact, anything, but don't say toilet. Because when you say toilet, you're trying to make yourself sound sophisticated, but all you've really done is show that you're just ignorant. You don't say serviette. See, it's like you're trying to make it sound French or something. Serviette. Napkin. It's not a settee, it's a sofa. Yeah? And so this is very important. And then the dinner party. Yes, the dinner party. And it's all very important to be able to say the right word and wear the right clothes. To wear the right... My dad taught me how to dress. You don't wear... For example, you never wear brown shoes with a dark suit. Look at someone wearing brown shoes with a dark suit. What? This person does not know how to dress. It's all these etiquettes. You probably have no idea about these things at all. But if you keep on consistently getting turned down for job interviews, right? Believe me. And the people who are giving the interviews are white, middle class, ex-public school boys. And I remember reading this article from this journalist. You know what, the interviewer, all he ever did is he looked, what public school did he go to? If the applicant went to such and such, went to a public school, meaning a private school, right? Went to a public school, okay, we'll think about giving him a job. No, not thinking about it. The old school tie network. For them, it's a god, because they think that by belonging to this part of society, by following its etiquettes, by following its rituals, by following its rules, they will get what they want and get what they need. Security, job, a place in society. And they think that that's success. They think that's what they need and what they want in life. It's their God, it's their religion. It's a type of religion in a way. And the dinner party. You have this array of forks and knives, like maybe 3 or 4 or even 5 or 6, depending, right? And spoons as well. And woe betide the person who uses the fish knife
to eat that beef. I mean, there's not even fish and you've got a fish knife. And there's even a special way to butter your bread roll. You know that? A special way to butter your bread roll? I was taught how to butter my bread roll properly. Absolutely. You see, what you have to do is you have to break your bread on your side plate. Not on your main plate, you've got a side plate. You break the bread on the side plate and you take a bit of butter, not take a bit of butter, you take a bit of butter with the butter knife from the butter dish, put it on your plate, and then you use your own personal butter knife, which is the small one, right? And then you butter it on the plate, not up in the air. You can't like get the bread roll, get a bit of butter, slap it on. That's like, oh my God. What's wrong with him? Her. So, and this is, and it's funny that these same people will often call themselves, we're not religious at all. They might even make fun of people who have a devotional life. But look at them. They're devoted. They have rituals. They have a type of religion. And they have a God. Something they believe is going to give them what they want and what they need. This is another type of God. So, is there a God? Answer, of course there's a God. There's millions of gods. Whatever people worship is a God. Whatever people put their faith and their hope and their trust in is a God. And everyone has it. Even atheists, they have gods. They have a God. So the real question, actually, this is a non-question, and we've answered it already. So I'm going to turn this question and put it in a different way. Out of all the things that people worship, out of all the things that people put their faith and their hope and their trust, and they rely upon them, and they believe that these things are going to give them what they want and what they need, which ones, if any, are actually worthy of worship? In other words, which of all of these gods that human beings worship, which one can actually give us what we need and what we want? Which, or what actually has the capability to provide us, to fulfill our needs and our desires? Which one is worthy of putting our faith and our hope and our trust in? This is the real question. So the true God, a true God, is one that is worthy of being worshipped. Something that can truly give us what we need and what we not want. And now what I plan to do is to destroy the false gods. That's my intention. I don't mean it in a very aggressive way. It just sounds a bit dramatic. You know? But no, my intention really is rather less dramatic than that. But what I do hope to do is just go through some of the main categories of things. I'm not going to go through every single, because we'd be here a long, long time. Okay? But I'm going to go through some of the main categories. I don't intend to use any very sophisticated arguments. In fact, most of my arguments are going to be taken right from this book here. It's called the Quran. Okay? Most of my arguments are going to be taken from the Quran. Okay? In fact, the very basis of the religion of Islam is a statement. La ilaha illallah. The very basis of the religion of Islam is a statement. La ilaha illallah. And what does that mean? It means there is no God except Allah, the God. It means that there is nothing worthy of worship except the God. Translated into what we've been talking about, that all the things that people put their faith in and their hope in and their trust in, except the Creator of the heavens and the earth, except Allah, they are all useless. And the Quran is not a book that just says that. It gives some good arguments why that's the case. The Quran talks about things that people worship, the gods that they worship. And the Quran talks about why these things are not worthy of being worshipped. I said that I wasn't really going to talk about the proof of the Creator's existence, and the reason is because I personally think it's not much of an issue. But let's spend some time on it. The Quran mentions some discussion concerning those people who believe that this universe is a product of some random event, chance and coincidence, who maybe just think the universe happened to just be here. But before we even go into some of these discussions, I'd like to lay down the premise on which our discussion is based. In other words, what is the point of view that we're coming from? Well, the point of view is really one of common sense. This idea that human beings, in general, human beings share a common set of perceptions. There is a way we perceive the world, and that is common to all of us. There are some certain things that all human beings everywhere can agree about. And there's no argument about it. For example, there may be an argument about it in a very philosophical sense, but in general, people do not disagree with the statement, part of something is less than the whole. A part is less than the whole. Part of something is less than the whole of a thing. Yes? It's not a controversial statement. It's something universally accepted. Okay. And there's a few things like that human beings agree about. One of the things I think that's universally agreed about by human beings, you won't find two people really, except some people who just like to discuss for the sake of discussion, but you won't find two real people disagreeing or arguing with the statement, you don't get something coming from nothing. In general, the universal experience of human beings is that when we see something or we observe something, we know and we understand that that thing has had a cause. It has been caused by something else. Something has caused it to come into existence. Something caused it to happen. This is universally accepted. And that's the simple argument against this idea that the universe just arrived. Because where in the totality of human experience can we say that we have seen or known such a thing to happen? In fact, our common experience tells us that when we see things working according to laws, patterns and systems, and the more sophisticated those patterns and systems, and the more intricate those laws, then it is a type of indication to us from our universal experience of a higher form of intelligence. Yes? We all accept that. That's why, when I tell you this extraordinary story that I'm going to unfold here today, and that is that here is something that is made essentially of two important components. Plastic, yeah, and silicon. Yeah? Plastic, where does plastic come from? Anyone know? Plastic comes from? Huh? Crude oil. Comes from oil. Plastic comes from oil. And silicon is? Sand. Tell me a place where there's lots of oil and sand. Saudi Arabia. Well, you got it, because one day I was walking along in the desert in Saudi Arabia and I found this lying. It is a product of thousands and thousands and thousands of years of random events. Oil spewed out, lightning struck, the sun shined, the wind blew, and the sand and the oil, after, by complete coincidence, managed to transform itself into this thing that I have here. What's actually really amazing is I switch this button, I can do all sorts of things with it as well. Make phone calls and write messages and even take photographs, but it's a product of a random event. A very unlikely one, I admit, but you have to believe me. And who will believe such a story? No one is going to believe it. No one will believe it. Yet some people are asking human beings to believe something absolutely more incredible than this. And the amazing thing is, they actually pretend that they're rational. That they have a rational argument. That their position is reasonable. that this universe is a product of chance and coincidence. Yet this universe is infinitely more complex than my mobile phone. The human brain is infinitely more complex. And when I say infinitely, I mean don't mean it absolutely infinitely, but it is incredibly more complex than a mobile phone. The computing power of the human brain is absolutely astronomical. If you compare the computing power of a human brain with the world's fastest supercomputer, and if we displayed it in a sense of a graph, if the human brain its computing power is represented by a meter squared, yeah, the world's fastest supercomputer would be in comparison the size of my thumbnail. So that's the supercomputer. That's its computing power, and the human brain is like 1 meter squared. SubhanAllah. Yet, somewhat, and what's the computing power of this thing? Very little. I don't think it needs an argument. I think atheists, people who, by the way, an atheist is not someone who doesn't know whether there's a God or not. They are people who say, I believe there is not a God. They are perhaps some of the most irrational people on the face of this earth. Some of the most irrational people. What they are proposing is so irrational, so improbable, so outside the realm of human everyday experience, that I don't see how such an idea could be portrayed as a rational one. How do they get away with convincing people that their position is reasonable or rational? Because according to what we understand reason to be and rational to be, it doesn't fit it. Rather, reason tells us that where we see things working according to laws, there is something that has made those laws and made that thing work according to those laws. In other words, our universe is evidence, at least if nothing else, of some great intelligence and some extremely capable power. Reason alone will not tell us very much about that intelligence and that power. But certainly that it exists, that is evident. I want to look, however, at some of the other categories. I'm not really going to go much more deeply into the concept of there being a creator. There are some arguments that we could develop about how we could understand that there could only be one such creator, and that this creator is eternal and self-sufficient. In other words, the creator of this universe must be different from the universe. One of the reasons being, if the creator of the universe, if the nature of God or the creator was the same as the creation, then the creator would actually be still creation. Yes. If its nature is the same, then it would be the same, creation. In other words, it doesn't really answer, and it doesn't really give us an explanation of how did this universe come into existence, how did it come to be the way it is. That's why it's really quite rational and reasonable to assume that the being that has brought this universe into existence, it is very rational and easy to conceive how that being must be eternal, self-sufficient, of a different nature from the creation. And that, by the way, automatically answers the question that people pose, well, if everything needs a creator, who created the creator? Because something that's eternal and self-sufficient doesn't need a creator. The universe, however, is not evidence. It's, from what we can see, it's not self-sufficient. The creator, however, we can't examine in the same way that we can examine the universe, but it's a perfectly rational understanding to come to. Not an explanation that we could give about the universe that's in front of us and that we can see. The next thing that I want to examine is the worship of idols. Now, I'm going to give some examples from the Quran. And I'm going to use as a paradigm a very famous story that Muslims know about in the Quran of the Prophet Abraham. Now the Prophet Abraham, or Ibrahim alayhi salam in Arabic, his father actually was one of the people who made idols. His father was actually one of the people who made idols many thousand years before the time of Jesus. And he used to see his dad making these idols. And from the same wood that he is carving the idols, he would see his dad throw into the fire and cook with. And so from a very young age, he began to really question, why do we worship these things? Why do we worship these carvings of wood and stone? The same wood and stone that my father uses to cook with is put up on a pedestal and then people worship it. Didn't make any sense to him. And he began to think a lot about this. And he began to question other things that his people used to worship. Some of them used to worship the stars and the sun and the moon. And he began to realize that these things really were not worthy of that worship. The sun and the moon and the stars, all of them seemed to follow some laws, some patterns. They came and they went. They themselves needed some creator, some director. They were dependent. And he tried to explain that and show that to his people in a simple way. One day he saw the stars. He was pointing out to them, look, this is the God. These stars, this is one of these stars or something, this is the God. And then the moon came. And the moon was so bright it outshone the stars. He said, no, then surely this one is the brightest of all. This has got to be the God. And then the sun rose. And of course, all the stars and the moon disappeared. He says, no, surely this is the Lord. This is the one. And then of course the sun set. And Abraham said, how can I worship something that sets? He said this to make them think. To make them think, how can we worship these things? That these things themselves are incapable. And he tried to explain to them, why should you worship some stone and some wood? But he was very frustrated. They were very obstinate. They were very arrogant. These people were set in their ways. It wasn't really so much about whether he was speaking the truth or not. It was more of a question like so many people. This is the religion of our ancestors. This is what we found our forefathers doing. We don't question it. Who are you? Who are you to say something different? But Abraham was very determined. So one day, the people were going on one of these processions, when they, religious processions, when they go and maybe take some of the idols through the city and stuff like that. So Abraham said to those people, I'm sick. He meant by that, I'm sick of what you're doing. He wasn't actually sick. He meant, I'm sick. And he was saying to them, I'm going to show you and I'm going to prove to you that your religion is a false religion. So as they were, all of them on this procession, he went into the temple. He went into the temple where they worshipped the idols and he smashed all of them, except the chief idol. He took his axe and he hung it round the neck of the chief idol. So when the people came and they found that their idols had been demolished, Abraham said, the people said, who has done this to our idols, this great blasphemy? Who has destroyed our idols? So they started talking amongst themselves and they remembered, yeah, there's that young man Abraham. He was saying he was going to show us something, he was going to do something. So they called him. And the king said to him, Abraham, did you do this to our idols? He pointed and said, ask the big one. Ask him. When he said that, they said to each other. And they said to Abraham, well, but you know that our idols can't speak to us. He said, why? Do you worship something that can't benefit you, it can't harm you, it can't even benefit itself? If it can't benefit itself, how is it going to benefit you? And when he said that, they knew. They realized, in their hearts and in their minds, they knew. We have been wrong. We've been wrongdoers. What we have done is wrong. How could we worship these things? But that didn't last long. That didn't last long at all. That just lasted, I don't know, a few minutes maybe. Then they started to get angry. Then they started saying, defend your gods. We must defend our gods. So anyway, they tried to kill Abraham. But the point being, let me go back. Universal human experience. Isn't that a universal human experience, brothers and sisters? Do you go and try and get something from someone or something that has no power and no ability to help you or to benefit you? Is that what we do? In our everyday, normal day lives, right? You want a student loan. You need to go to university. You need to study. You want to get a loan so you can go through university. Yeah? Where do you go? Do you go down underneath the arches to find some of those homeless people over there? Right? Are those the people you go and borrow money from? Well, seriously, do you go down and ask homeless, penniless people to borrow money so you can come and study at university? Yes or no? No, you don't. Why? Why? Huh?
They can't benefit us.
They haven't got it themselves. They can't even look after themselves. How are they going to lend you money? Yes? True or not? Okay, so when Kuwait was invaded by Iraq, remember that? Yeah? So remember when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait? Yeah? Did the Kuwaitis phone up Bangladesh and say, can we borrow your one helicopter? Because we need to fight against... Yeah, is that what they did? No, because Bangladesh, you know, when the floods happen, they can't even look after themselves. They're not going to be able to come and sort out the problems of Kuwait. No one in their life does that. So why would anyone go and worship a piece of wood or a piece of stone? If this is an amazing thing. Listen, it's an amazing thing. A man walks into a shop. Okay? He says, oh, he sees all the gods there, right? He says, I want that god. So the man, he picks up the god and brings it down from the shelf. The god can't get down itself. He has to pick up the god and bring it down. Then the man pays money to take this god, right? And he carries it home. You think maybe the god would carry him home? No. He carries the god home. And then he sticks the god up on the shelf. And if the god fell off the shelf, it couldn't stop itself. Yet he has to do all of these things for his God. Yet he stands there saying, oh God, oh such and such, do this for me. Answer my prayers. Do this and do that. How extraordinary. What nonsense is that? It's an also amazing thing. You find many Muslims. You won't find many Muslims worshipping gods like that. You know what they'll do? A man will die. A pious man will die. Yes. And they will wash him. They will wash him. Because he can't wash himself. And they will shroud him and clothe him afterwards. Because he can't clothe himself. And they will carry him to the grave. He can't walk there himself because he's dead. And they will put him in the grave and bury him. And then they will go to him and say, oh, such and this and that. Ask Allah for this and that. What's the difference? That you find many Muslims practicing this type of idolatry. The dead cannot hear the living. In fact, if the dead can't benefit themselves, when we die, our deeds are finished. We can't benefit ourselves when we're dead. How are we going to benefit others? So this is just common sense. Universal human experience. Universal human experience. Just to go back as a side point, not a side point, but another point. I remember once a brother had written me a letter, and that I had recommended that when he's talking to people about Islam, he starts about the existence of God and the oneness of God and the things that we were talking about. And all the people, this is in Cambridge, and all the people in his, at the table who were discussing, they all agreed. They all agreed with him that this universe, being a product of chance and coincidence, was extremely unlikely. But some of them said, however, it's still possible. It's still possible. And that's what we're going to follow, that possibility. And what I've said in reply is, okay, how many of you come to university, yeah? Actually, maybe it's not a good example because some people probably give you this, right? But imagine, a person comes to university, doesn't study at all, doesn't go to any lectures at all, does not read any books at all, does not do any preparation at all, nothing. They just come to university and do not even anything, right? Will they go and sit in the exam and get a first? Yeah? So if you, no, wait a minute, if that's what you think, right, if you really think that it's possible, isn't it possible that you could do nothing and sit in the exam and just by coincidence just somehow get the right answers? Isn't it possible? Remotely, but it's possible. But who lives their life like that? Why is it that when it comes to these other matters of God and religion and the creation of what we worship, suddenly, I don't know, some whole different type of standard applies? Why? I don't understand. So, this is really what the Quran, its argument against idol worship. These are things that cannot help themselves. If they can't help themselves, how can they help you? Meaning, worshipping them is useless and worshipping them is futile. It is of no benefit. The next broad category of things that are worshipped other than God are human beings. Many human beings worship other human beings. They put their faith in them, they trust in them, they rely upon them. Sometimes, in fact quite often, some people make human beings equal with the Creator. Of course, the example we will use here is that of Jesus. This is the example the Quran gives. There are many other man gods. Many Buddhists believe Buddha is God. The people who follow Hare Krishna believe he's the manifestation of God. There is a guy in India right now whose name is Sai Baba. Yes, people believe he is God. And there's this some guy called David Beckham. Yeah? No, but I mean, I don't think anyone really thinks he's the creator of anything, right? But no, as for these others, really, people believe that they are literally the manifestation of God. Okay? But the Quran gives some very beautiful, simple arguments, points to bear in mind. Very simple. One of them is this: that Jesus and Mary, they walked on the earth and they ate food. They walked on the earth and they ate food. Now it makes where you say, where's the argument? That's the argument. Because by definition, something that walks on the earth and eats food, if it eats food, what happens to that food when you eat it? That food has to be passed out. Something that eats food relies upon food for its existence. Something that needs food in order to exist cannot be self-sufficient. Something that is on this earth is limited and temporary and finite. Whereas God is infinite and eternal. God is eternal and infinite and self-sufficient, not temporary, mortal and needy. The Quran also says, if Allah, or if God, the Creator, wanted to destroy Jesus and Mary and everything in the earth, who could stop Him? Who could stop Him? Meaning, Jesus, Mary, and everything in this earth is completely under the control of God. What is under the control of God cannot be the same as God. What is under the control of God cannot be the same as God. Simple. You don't need anything much more complicated than that. Something that eats and breathes, that we can see it and is limited, cannot be the Creator. In fact, by definition, that thing needs a Creator. That thing leads us to believe that there must be a Creator. How can it therefore be the Creator? And we could extend the arguments and we could, take it further than that, but it's very, very simple. And that applies to any human being. Anyone who claims that another human being is God. However, some Christians would say that, and maybe this is more specific to Christianity, I don't know many other religions that make this type of claim, except perhaps some pagan religions, that Jesus is not really the God, he's the Son of God. Now, the way the Quran deals with that really is by making us think, what does it mean when you say Son of God? What do you mean Son of God? What does it mean? Yeah? Son of God. What is a son? What is a son? I don't mean the sun that shines. My son, yes, my son is a human being like me. Yes? Me and my wife committed an intimate act, and from that intimate act came the child. Yes? So if God has a son, did God have a wife with whom he committed an intimate act? Is that what you're saying? If you say someone is the Son of God? In other words, let's say, did God have sex with someone? Because that's what a son is. A product of an intimate act. Most Christians would say straight away, no. That's not what we mean. So, well, what do you mean? If you say he's the Son of God. If you don't mean that God actually, literally had a wife, and by the way, what? If you don't mean that God actually, literally had a wife, and by the way, God could not condemn fornication for us and then commit fornication himself. That's why God must have had a wife. Not a mistress or a girlfriend or, stuff. Well, no, but So, what do we mean? Did God adopt Jesus as a son? Is that fitting for God? The Quran asks this question. Is it befitting the majesty of God that he should take for himself and adopt for himself a son? Well, all you have to do, let's just think of it in human terms to understand something. If I bought with myself today, a little goldfish, yeah, in a bag. I say, this is Jaws, yeah, my son. You say, Abdur Raheem, that's a goldfish. No, it is a goldfish, but he has a room in the house. He sits with me at dinner, okay, on the table. The adoption papers are coming through next week. That is my son. And you say, look, you're a human being, that's a fish. You can't have a fish as your son. If you want a son or adopt a son, you need something like you, a human being. Yes? It's very easily understood. So then, what is the comparison? I am much more like a fish than I am like God. If we insult each other by saying, you son of a dog, you son of a cow, your mother's a snake, yes, your mother-in-law is a dog. If that's how we insult each other, right? Why? Because why am I insulted? You called me an animal. I am not an animal, I'm a human being. Yet, some people go around saying, God has a son, who is a human being. A human being. What are human beings? We are little creatures. Fly up in an aeroplane and see human beings. In fact, you can't see human beings because they're little specks. On an earth that is a speck. In a solar system that is a speck on the outer spiral of our galaxy, which is 100,000 light years across. The galaxy is one of millions of galaxies in a universe that is estimated to be 10 billion light years across. But God's Son was a speck and a speck on a speck and a speck. That's insulting God. That's making one so great like something incredibly small. That is why, in fact, the Quran says the heavens are ready to rent asunder and the mountains are ready to crumble into ruin because the people say God has a son. It's insulting God. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. What does it mean, actually, these words? We find really it doesn't mean anything. Now I want to talk about something slightly different. Materialism. It's not a new philosophy. Thinking that this world money and power and technology and science. We may think in this day and age that it is unprecedented. This is the age of science and technology. But in fact, in reality, if we look in human history, we can look at the ancient Egyptians. The Quran gives the example of Ad and Thamud, people who were incredibly intelligent, could build the most amazing structures. They were extremely gifted, intelligent, they had great engineering capabilities, yet Allah says in the Quran, travel the earth, go on, travel the earth, and see what happened to those people who rejected faith. Of course, in reality, this is the one of this thing is the one that seems to have more of a real impact in our lives. It does seem that money could, in some ways, make our life better. It does seem that technology and medicine can make our life better. It may seem to some people that these things could therefore give us everything. But that, in reality, is an illusion. Because we only need to see many civilizations that came before us travel to Rome. I remember whenever I go up north, not up north, whenever I used to go to Middlesbrough, almost always I used to make a trip to Hadrian's Wall. It's not that far. And I used to do it to think about something. I used to stand on that wall and I used to look south. And I would think to myself, once a Roman soldier stood here and he must have looked south and thought, as far as I can see and as far as I can travel is Rome. Where is Rome now? The ancient Egyptians who built pyramids, people can't even figure how they built them. How was their wealth? The Persians, who when the Muslims went to see the General Rostrum, the Sahaba Rabia, he walked over a carpet that was inlaid with precious stones. A huge, massive carpet in which everyone was sitting on chairs. These are the nations that came before. Where are they? What happened to them? With all their power and all their wealth and all their technology that they had amassed, what benefit did it really have for them in the end? Even the Muslim civilization. We often talk as Muslims. We talk about Alhambra. Alhambra, the peak of art and architecture, the beautiful irrigation system that still exists in southern Spain today. Yet look at the reality. The reality is that the king of Granada, Abdullah, the last king of Granada, he finished Alhambra 2 years later. The Spanish conquistadors came and threw him out. Ferdinand and Isabella, 2 years after, they threw him out. What did his palace achieve for him? You know what it achieved for him? He stood on the hill crying. Crying. His mother said to him, you cry like a child for what you couldn't fight like a man. You cry like a child for what you couldn't fight for like a man. What did his wealth do? What did his palace do? In fact, Howard Hughes, they've got the film about him now, The Aviator. I remember reading about that guy when I was a teenager. The Onassis family. The Gettys. The Rockefellers. Read the lives of these people. If wealth equals happiness, there's something wrong with that equation. Because a lot of them don't seem very happy to me. So Allah says in the Quran, travel the earth. See what happened to those people. You think, really, that success is in these things? There were people that knew greater in wealth. Greater. Yet look at their traces. That's what Allah, God has left some traces of their civilizations for us to learn a lesson by it. The point being, those who put their faith in those things, and they put their trust in those things, they put their faith and trust in something ultimately that will let them down. It will let them down. There is another thing, another type of God that people have. This God is nationalism, racism. Maybe I'm not using the right word. It is the belief that because I am born of a certain race or a certain tribe of people, I am innately superior and gifted and destined for success in this life and the next. All of the things I have talked about are common throughout the world, not just to one set of people. But the Quran uses paradigms. The Christians are used as a paradigm for those people who believe that someone is God. The pagan Arabs and the people of Abraham for those who worship idols. The Jews are used as a prototype or a paradigm for those people who believe that by being born or being a member of a particular race is an automatic type of ticket for success and salvation. Because that is one of the qualities, that I'm not saying every Jew has it, but that is one of the qualities that you find strongly in them. Yet, Allah mentions in the Quran and talks about this very self-same thing. If this was the case, then why did God punish you? Why has God punished you? In fact, God has said this is a lie. It is a lie against Him. Belonging to a certain tribe or a certain race is not a guarantee of anything. It is not a guarantee of success in this life or the next. It is not a guarantee of God's favor. This is something that is very, very strongly denied by God. And, we could see in front of our eyes many reasons to support that. These that I have mentioned are some of the things in which people put their faith and their trust. Probably the main ones. My race, my money, some man god, some idol. These are the things that you find in one degree or another degree people worship, they put their faith in, they put their trust in. These are the gods that people worship. All I have done so far is negated. I have tried to show why these things are not worthy of being worshipped. But now I want to affirm something. I want to affirm to you, and I would like to give you some reason why I think all of us should affirm that the one that is truly worthy of worship is the one that has created this universe. The one that has complete power and control over this universe. The one that controls life and death. The one who is the king over all things and the controller of all things. But my argument to you now is not going to be a rational argument. I'm not going to base it on reason. I'm going to base it on something completely different. I'm going to appeal to some completely different faculty in you. I'm going to rely upon the fact that deep down inside you know that what I'm going to tell you is absolutely true. That every single one of us, every human being knows innately, and this is what our religion, Islam, teaches, that in the innate nature of every human being is an instinctive knowledge that this world and everything in this world is ultimately of no real benefit. And also we innately know that there is a being that exists that has the ability to give us what we need and to give us what we want. That has the ability to control everything in this universe and everything in our lives. What's the proof of that? The Quran gives an example of some people who are merchants. They go onto a boat, a ship, with their merchandise, looking forward to all the money that they're going to make, all the trade they're going to do, and they sail out to sea. However, when they get out to sea, a storm starts. Not just any storm, but a massive storm. The Quran describes the waves of this storm as coming over the ship like the roof of a tent. Can you imagine that? So you're in this ship and the waves are coming over you like the roof of a tent. And these people, at that moment and that time, their faith in the technology, the ship, they don't think the ship's going to save them anymore. The captain, he's gone, he's washed overboard. Their money? They're going to call on their money? They think their money's going to save them then? No. Their girlfriend, their boyfriend, their wife, their children, the country you belong to is going to help you then? The idols that people worshipped, the things that they called upon. No, at that moment, when all of those things they realize are of no benefit, then the human being instinctively makes a call, makes a plea, sincerely, with complete faith and complete conviction and complete trust and hope. Oh God, help me. Oh God, save me. This is not a God that is sitting next to them in the boat. This is not a God that is here in this world. This is a God that has power over it. They may not know the word God. It's not the word that's important. It's the fact that deep down inside they know that this power exists that has the ability to rescue them from their predicaments. Every single human being knows that. That is a proof, in fact, in every human being, that in fact nothing is worthy of worship except that one God. Indeed, that there is no true God except that one God. Then the Quran says to humanity, why? Why is it that at that moment, at that time, you recognize your Lord and your Creator? Yet if He saves you, if He saves you from your predicament and returns you safely back to shore, what do you do? What do? You just go back to worshipping all those other things that you used to worship before. All those false gods that you used to worship before. Why? Understand that fact right now in every part of your life. In everything. That the one who truly can give you what you need and give you what you want is that same one that you know in your heart who can rescue you from that predicament that you would find yourself in. That is the one who is worthy of worship. Of course, whether you believe the Quran is from that God, that's another matter and that's a whole different subject and discussion. But maybe one of the greatest clues that it is the very things that I've been saying right here tonight. Anyway, I hope I've answered the question here today. Is there a God? So thank you very much everyone for listening to this.
I'd like to thank Brother Abdur Raheem Green for delivering that lecture. There will now be an opportunity for questions and answers. So can all the questions be forwarded to the front? And you can ask by putting up your hand up as well, inshallah. The first question is, I am a Muslim and I don't pray regularly. Reason being, it is not from the heart. Keep thinking of other stuff when I'm praying. What is your advice?
Okay, what is my advice? What comes to my mind right now is that about 18 years ago, when I first started practicing Islam, I had the same sort of problem. I would start praying and I would be thinking of absolutely everything except my prayers. I mean, it was so severe. I mean, it was like I could actually think about, what the Quran was saying, and I could think about, God and all sorts of things outside the prayer. But it was literally the minute I raised my hand and started to pray, I just could not seem to focus, and I couldn't seem to concentrate, and all sorts of things came to my head, and it was very, very hard. But the thing is, I didn't give up. I just, I stuck. I just kept with it. I found one of the things that helped me a lot was learning the last 3 surahs of the Quran and reciting them. That helps a lot. If you are just asking about concentrating in your prayers, then I suppose maybe that is slightly different from the issue of whether you are praying from your heart or not. If you mean that you're just doing it because you feel that if you don't do it, your friends who happen to be Muslims and your family who happen to be Muslim will say some things and you don't want them to say those things. In other words, you're doing it almost in a type of hypocrisy. You don't really believe. Is that what you're saying? If you're saying it's not really in your heart, you don't really want to pray because you don't really want to obey God, you don't really want to live your life according to what God says, because maybe you don't feel there is a God, or maybe you feel if there is a God, maybe He just doesn't care about us, or maybe you feel that the Quran is not from God. I mean, that's really the things that, if it's not from your heart, if that's what you mean by it's not from your heart, your issues are deeper. Your issues are much deeper than, I just can't say my prayers. You have to ask yourself, why? Why don't I want to obey God? Why don't I want to do the things that God tells me to do? Is it because you don't believe that it's from God? Is it because you don't really believe that God's threat of punishment is a true threat? What, is God lying when He says He's going to punish people who don't do this and do that? Maybe you don't believe in God's reward. So the problem here is a problem of certainty. It is a problem of certainty. You are lacking certainty, if that's what you're talking about. So how do I get certainty? How do I feel more sure? How do I feel convinced that the Quran is from God, that Muhammad is the messenger, that these things that it says are true? That's, I've asked the questions, but a bit of a big question for me to answer myself, okay? But I mean, part of it is really getting knowledge. The big part of it is getting knowledge. Certainty, knowledge and certainty are two things that come together. When you study the Quran more, when you study Islam more, when you study the life of Prophet Muhammad more, when you look into these things more deeply, the more you study them, the more deeply you study them, and you ask people of knowledge and so on and so forth, then more and more your certainty will develop. One of the best things to dispel certainty, to dispel doubt and to increase certainty is knowledge. So that's one thing. As for if it is just like you're being distracted in your prayer and you can't focus and you can't concentrate, then one of the things you need to do is, first of all, I would recommend that you make sure that you understand this is something that really surprises me. I mean, there are Muslims who pray and don't understand a word of what they're saying. If I ask them, what does it mean, Maliki Yawmiddin? They don't know. What does it mean, Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in? They don't know. What does it mean, At-tahiyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu? I just say it. Well, I mean, if that's the case, then of course you can't concentrate in your prayer. Because you're not really praying, you're just saying some words that you don't really know what they mean. And that's not what prayer is about. In fact, there's no disagreement amongst the scholars that the minimum amount of Arabic you have to know is to understand what you're saying in your prayers. In fact, the reason why Allah prohibited people being intoxicated while praying is, as the Quran tells us, the meaning of what the Quran tells us is, you will not know what you're saying. If you're drunk or stoned or wasted, right, you're going to be standing there saying a whole lot of stuff that you just don't know what you're saying. So if you're praying in Arabic and you don't understand what it is you're saying, it's the same thing. You're not knowing what you're saying. You have to know what you're saying. You have to understand. The prayer has a purpose. It has a reason.
When you understand what you're saying, then you begin to understand that purpose and reason. I think that will be one of the first steps that you could take in, if you haven't already, in helping yourself with that. I mean, otherwise, without knowing more details and talking to that person personally and seeing where they are and stuff like that, I can't give much more advice than that.
The next question, I'd like to combine these two questions. If there is a God, why is it that our prayers are sometimes not answered? Also, if there is a God, then why is there so much suffering in the world? Right.
Okay. Well, I mean, the answer to the second question is, I don't understand the connection between the two things. I don't understand. If there is a God, why there is so much suffering in the world? Okay. What actually, logically, is the connection between the two? What's the actual logical connection between those two things? Between God and there being suffering or not being suffering? Unless, of course, your presumption is that you shouldn't suffer. I mean, me? Why should I suffer? I'm so important. Or maybe you think you are God, or I don't know what you think, that you think you shouldn't suffer. So there is a presumption in the person who asked that question that you shouldn't suffer and that God doesn't want you to suffer. I mean, the question of human suffering doesn't actually tell us about whether there is a God or not. Does it really? Does the question of suffering actually tell us whether there's a God or not? Does the question of suffering make the brain any less organized? Does the human suffering make the alternation of the heavens and the earth any less amazing and in need of a creator? Does human suffering make any of these things go away? No, it doesn't. Why do we? What is the compelling reason for believing that there is a creator? Because we look at our universe, we see it works according to these laws and these patterns. It's compelling that we believe that there's a creator. So the existence of a creator and the existence of God and the existence of human suffering are not two things that are connected at all. I make this point because it is a totally false argument of atheists to say, there is so much suffering, how can there be a God? Because the two things are not logically connected. It's a very emotional argument from people who claim to be very rational. It's actually emotional. It's an emotional argument. It's not a rational argument. Okay? So the correct question should be, why does God allow us to suffer? That's a different question altogether. If you want to know why God allows human suffering, and why does God allow us to suffer, and why has God made the world in which there is suffering, then in order to know the answer to that question, we need some information from God. That's what we need. We need some information from God. We need somewhere where God can explain to us why the world is the way it is, and why He's making us suffer, and why the things are the way they are. And then we could say, oh, now I can understand the purpose of that. Yeah? So, it comes back to that. It comes back to this issue. Did God reveal something to us? Has God sent some guidance to us? Muslims believe, and I personally believe, for what I think are very good reasons, that the Quran is from God. The Quran explains to us why the world is the way it is. What is the purpose of our life? What is the reason for our existence? Why are human beings here? We have a purpose, and the world is the way it is in order to reflect the purpose for which we have been created. The purpose of our existence as human beings is to choose to worship God and obey Him, and to choose to leave disobedience to God and rebellion and denial of Him.
That is the purpose of our existence. That's why God has created the world it is. Because if there was not good and evil, there would be no choice. If there was no evil in the world, how could you choose not to do evil if there was only good? Yes? That's one of the reasons. One of the reasons why there is suffering and evil and so on and so forth and whatever these things are, one of the reasons is exactly that. Because it is only through these things that we can actually make a choice. And that is something unique about the human beings. We are creatures who have the capability of choosing, and we have been created to choose. There are other creatures that God has not, who has created just to worship Him. The angels, they worship God and they have no choice except to worship God. That's what they do. So He has created them for that, and He has created us for something else. That's the purpose of our life. We can accept that information and we can act upon it. And as we look into it deeper, and there are other reasons as well, but this is being the main reason. Actually, part of something that is quite amazing when you begin to look into this issue is that even though the existence of evil is necessary in order for us to choose, yet still the existence of evil is a consequence of our bad choices and our wrong choices. So that in fact, at the same time, we have brought evil upon ourselves as human beings. Maybe not individually, not every human individual that suffers some evil, it is a consequence of their personal actions. But in general, human beings live in a world where there is suffering due to some wrong choices that we have made. Yeah, okay, but I can do. What is the Quran? The Quran is the words of God, the speech of God, that was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad about 1,400 years ago, over a period of 23 years. Okay? It is what Muslims believe to be a miracle. The Quran is a miracle. It is something that could not be written by a human being. Indeed, the Quran challenges any collection of human beings and jinns and spirits and whatever you want to use to give you inspiration, that you should try to make just one chapter like the smallest chapter of the Quran, and the Quran says you will never be able to do it. It is miraculous in many different levels. It is not only linguistically a unique work that is not comparable to any other form of the Arabic language. It is not like normal speech, it's not like poetry, it's not like any of the types of speech the Arabs used to use before or after, yet still the words are Arabic words and they are comprehensible and understandable. This is a miracle. How could such a thing, and also at the same time of such great beauty and eloquence, from where and how was such a work being able to produce by the likes of someone as the Prophet Muhammad? Whereas the greatest poets of Arabia who existed at that time could not make a single chapter like it. That's just one of its miraculous qualities. So this is the Quran.
Next question. Muslims call Jesus alayhi salam the Spirit of God. What is your response to the Christian argument that this term is akin to the Son of God?
What does it mean, the Spirit of God? It means that it is every human being has a spirit that belongs to God. Every human being has a spirit, a soul, a ruh. And everything belongs to God.
My ruh, your ruh, everybody's ruh, everybody's spirit, everybody's soul belongs to God. Okay? But in Arabic, in fact in any language, and in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, He sometimes emphasizes something by attributing it to Himself to show and to emphasize that He loves it especially. So for example, the Kaaba is called Baytullah. It's called the house of Allah. Doesn't mean that Allah lives in that place and that's the place where if you want to go and have some tea or something, go to Allah's house there, knock on the door. Excuse me Allah, could I come in? No. Every house is Allah. It means it's a possessive term. It belongs to Allah. Everything belongs to Allah. But when He says it is His house, means that Allah has specialized it. Allah has dignified it above the other things. Ruh Allah means this spirit is something especially that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has exalted it by attributing it to Himself. That's what it means.
Next question is, all religions are essentially the same. What do you say to this?
Wow, after what I just said, I would say, listen to my lecture again. There's the answer.
What does Islam say regarding their duty for the strong to protect the weak, be it a Muslim or not?
Yes, no, I have to move into a different brain sphere here to try and answer that one. Okay, yes, it is very important for Muslims to stand up for justice and to protect the weak and the ill-treated and oppressed. In fact, that is one of the reasons that is mentioned in the Quran and one of the causes for which Allah commands Muslims to go and fight, even if it is physically, to save people from injustice and tyranny and those people who are weak and ill-treated and oppressed, who are crying out for help. And it is a duty of the Muslim to, even if necessary, give their life to help such people, whether they are Muslim or not Muslim.
I am going to a sheikh, a scholar, for guidance in certain matters. The same thing, is this the same thing as idolatry, e.g. marriage guidance?
Urgent. Okay. No, it's not. It is not the same thing. You can go to people to ask them some things and to seek some guidance from them. Okay. We believe as Muslims that in this world we shouldn't get confused about something. Okay. As Muslims, we believe in general that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created this universe according to certain patterns and certain norms. One of those patterns or one of those norms is what we call cause and effect. If we do a certain action, normally the result of that action is a certain event. Yes? So normally if I want to get married, I have to find someone to get married to. I'm not just going to sit in my house, close my doors and just think I'm going to get married because I trust in God. Okay? No. In fact, this contradicts what Islam teaches. In our religion, we should do everything that we can that is lawful and permissible in order to bring about the desired goal. If we want to achieve this, we should take the means that are evident and normal and clear in order to achieve that means. That's not idolatry. The difference is, however, we don't rely upon those means. That's the difference. We don't rely upon those means. It's a very important difference. We do them, but we don't rely upon them. Because ultimately we rely upon God. This is the difference. So, there's nothing wrong with having money. There's nothing wrong with working for money. Yes, in general, they say money makes the world go round. And it's true that, by and large, in order to get things and obtain things and achieve things, you need money. And our religion teaches us, therefore, go out, earn money, make a livelihood. Use the means that are available in order to achieve that goal. But the difference being, I don't put my faith in those means. I don't put my faith in the money. I don't think that money is going to make me successful. I believe it is Allah that is going to make me successful. I'm using these means because that's what God has told me to. But I don't trust in it and I don't rely upon it, and my faith is not in it and my hope is not in it. There's a big difference between the two things. Bells in your head is when you are ready to do haram things, forbidden things, in order to get what you want. When you're ready to disobey God in order to get the things you want, that is a very clear indication that you have stopped relying and trusting upon God, and now you've begun to rely and trust upon the means. That's an indication. I'm not saying that you move to worshipping money yet, but it's an indication that that's the way you're going. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, woe be to the worshipper of the dinar and the dirham. Woe be to the worshipper of the dinar and the dirham. Dinar and dirham was money used in the time of the Prophet. And then he described these people. He described these people. How are they? When they have it, they are happy and content. And when they don't have it, they are sad and they are distressed. Whereas the quality of a believer in God, a true believer in God, is contentment. Is contentment. Whether I have it or I don't have it, I use the lawful means, I do the best that I can, and whatever comes my way, it's in the hands of God. But truly I believe my happiness and my success lies with my Creator. Yeah.
Different religions have different beliefs, and each say that they are right. You are a Muslim, you say you are right. Who is right? I'm a Sikh, I say I am right.
You know, that's why we're sitting here today, coming to lectures, listening, talking, discussing, because everyone just has to find out for themselves. Yes, everyone claims that they're right, but claims have to be proven. Anyone can make a claim. Anyone can make a claim. City University does not belong to City University anymore, it belongs to me. This is my land, my property, and I'm going to turn it into a big hippie commune where we're going to smoke marijuana mad. You know? And it's my right to do that, and that's my claim. Now, anyone can make any claim that they like. Right? I can claim that I'm a prophet of God and I'm receiving revelation from God. If I want to, I can sit here and make that claim. But the onus, the proof, the burden of proof is on the claimant. The one who's making the claim has to prove that claim. And that's the crux of the matter. That's really what it's about. If you're right, bring your proof. If what you say is true, bring your evidence. Prove it. Bring some convincing, clear evidence that what you say is true. So, Muslims will bring the Quran. That's what we do. Here is the Quran. This is one of the reasons I believe that my religion is true. The Quran. Why? Well, I gave some reasons already. We could give some other reasons. Why do I believe this book is from God? Well, one of the reasons we would ask someone to believe this book is from God is that it has things in this book that no one knew 1,400 years ago. Yet we just discovered it today. The brothers here, they have a book that they're giving away, a brief illustrated guide to Islam. And the brother was telling me that there is a couple of sisters here in this university who converted to Islam from reading that book, and one of the reasons was because of the statements in the Quran that were mentioned 1,400 years ago, that we just began to discover these things today. How could that be in that book? How? So bring your proof. If you're going to claim that your religion is the right religion, Well, give me your argument, give me your proof, give me your reasons that you claim that your religion is the right religion. That's all we can do. Yeah? By the way, to say something like this, and this is getting, I'm going to go on to, I don't want to go on to another topic, but to say something like, I believed in this and then it changed my life. I used to be like this, but now I'm like that. And I used to be this bad person, but now I'm this good person. Well, and you say, that's the proof. The proof is, this thing happened to me, I accepted this religion, and my life is completely different, and now I'm saved. Okay, fine. You know what I'll say? I'll say, I respect you, I respect your experience, but you know what? The same thing happened to me. I used to follow your religion, and then I changed to this religion, Islam, and I got saved. And my life became so much better. So, what does that prove then? Yeah? I mean, some guys take up snowboarding, right? And that changes their life, right? Some people go skydiving, and that changes their life. Some people smoke marijuana, and that changes their life. For a year or two. So, some experience, and that, that's, because lots of people experience those things. It's not really a proof of anything. Meaning, my point is, you can't really prove much with that. It's a proof to you, sure. And I can't deny you your personal experience. But that's all it is, a proof to you. It's subjective. You don't prove anything to me by offering me how such and such changed your life. But it's interesting. It's good that it changed your life, but it doesn't really prove that much. Proof has to be something we can all sit down on the table and we can examine it. Yeah? That's what we need, something like that.
We say that we humans have the option to choose what we do. However, doesn't this contradict the concept of fate and destiny? If we all have a particular fate and destiny, then how would praying help us when the events of our future are fixed?
The person who wrote this question is really regurgitating a whole series of misconceptions that people have about fate and destiny. I don't even like this word fate. Let's just leave fate out of it. Because the moment I say fate, something pops into my mind. And a lot of the time when I'm trying to discuss this issue, but they say, but fate, I say, just forget that word fate, please. Just forget it. Okay? What do Muslims believe? We believe in qadr, wal qadar, the measure and the decree. We believe, and what does it really come down to? It's very simple. We believe that, number one, God knows everything that is going to happen. Yeah? That's the first thing. Everything. Big, small, everything, God knows it. Number two, it's all been written down. 50,000 years before Allah created this universe and this creation, everything was written down in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet, that was going to happen from the beginning of creation to the end. Including who's going to go to paradise, who's going to go to hellfire, which leaf would fall where, which raindrop would fall where, which atom would vibrate at what rate, everything. Who would be the next president of the United States, who will win the next election. It's all been written down. From God's knowledge, He knew everything that is going to happen, and it's all been written down in Lawh al-Mahfuz. Yeah? So that's one. God knows everything. Number two, that's the knowledge of God. The second is kitab, the writing. The third is the mashiach of Allah. That means that nothing can happen unless God lets it happen. We wouldn't be sitting here today unless God let us sit here today. Nothing takes place in this universe unless God let it happen. And everything has been created by God. Nothing creates itself. Nothing brought itself into existence. So everything that happens because Allah let it happen, and God has created everything. Yeah? That doesn't contradict free will. Because one of the things that Allah let happen is that He let us choose whether we would obey Him or disobey Him. He created the world in which we live. He created the world the way it is. And part of the way that Allah created that world is that He gave us the choice to obey Him or disobey Him. Even though He knew from His knowledge, before He created everything, whether we would obey Him or not. He knew it. He did not force us to obey Him or disobey Him. We did that from our choice. He did not compel us. And I will give you a simple example. Okay? Imagine you are all my students, and you've been my students now for 3 years here at the university. I know all of you very, very well. Okay? I know you so well that I predict your grades. So I have some knowledge of you. Yes? My knowledge of you allows me to predict your grades. And I write down the prediction of those grades. Does my knowing it and my writing it down force you to pass or fail or to get those grades? Does it force you to do that? Does it compel you to do that? Yes or no? No, you still choose to study, to work, to do whatever. But I know, and of course if my knowledge is greater, then I know even more. I'm not comparing the human beings to God. I'm just saying, if this is true and it is possible with human beings, it is more possible with Allah. So therefore, this person is mixing the ideas up. They are thinking that God's knowing it and God's writing it means God's forced us to do it. No. Okay? We obey or disobey Allah from our choice. The consequences of our actions determine what happens to us ultimately. Although, of course, Allah knows what is going to happen to us and what we're going to choose to do. Yeah? Don't ask me anything more than that, because that's all I can say. I can't explain it any better than that.
Are there any further questions? I'd like to remind you that you can speak to Brother Abdur Raheem in person. And inshallah. And there's just a couple of announcements, inshallah, before we close. The first one is, I'd like to invite you to our next event. Tomorrow, inshallah, you can see us on the screen. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the man to listen to the message. That will be delivered by Abu Aliya in the Burdi Lecture Theatre in the Centenary Building. So I'd like to invite you to that. Also, I'd like to also inform you of Westminster University. They're having their annual dinner on Wednesday the 9th of March. So if anybody would like tickets for that, please contact the ISOC. And there's also one of the... There's also double material at the back, inshallah, so please take a look at that. And it's all free. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.